Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our AMRC webinar this afternoon. It's great to see so many of you here and joining, so we'll get started. Just to introduce myself, my name's Katrina Manville and I'm the Director of Policy at the AMRC, and I'll be chairing the event today. So to give you a couple of housekeepings before we get started with the interesting bit, just to let you know we're recording the meeting and just ask that you keep your microphones muted. Please do engage with this. We will all get so much more out of it if you ask your questions. So put them in the chat and we will hopefully group them together to then allow our speakers to answer them in the second half of our meeting today. So, as I said, thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you to the NIHR and particularly the RDN for holding this webinar for our members. Over the last year and a half, the RDN, or formerly the CRN, has been undergoing a transition at a national and local network level. And this webinar aims to update you on the new RDN, the transition that it has gone through, and the services it now provides charities and to other stakeholders, and the role that RDN plays in supporting researchers in the NHS. But to speak to you today, we've got a great double act from Emma Lowe, now Director of Transformation at the RDN, and a familiar face to many of you from her previous role at the Department of Health, and Kate Blackstone, NIHR's Charity Engagement Lead, who started to meet many of you in recent months as she settles into this newly created role. So over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Katrina, and hi everyone. Great to be holding this webinar with you today. As Katrina said, I'm now the Director of Transformation for the Research Delivery Network. I'm going to specifically focus on the work of the Research Delivery Network today, rather than the broader NIHR, but obviously we fit into that bigger system, and I'm sure that you'll have questions that cut across our work and other parts of the NIHR, and Kate Blackstone is here to answer those questions, and we'll be working very closely with her and the rest of NIHR going forward. So I'm going to present some slides and talk through kind of what's happening across the network and what's changing and what isn't. And then we've got plenty of time for questions, and please do go ahead and ask any questions that you want today. Very, very happy to take those. So hopefully my slides now coming up. I'm not looking at the display screen. So Katrina, can you see my slides?
They're looking great, thanks.
Lovely, I will work through them then. So I'm going to start off by talking a bit about the vision, mission and purpose of the RDN, because it is slightly different to the Clinical Research Network, and not just because we've taken clinical out of the title. So I'm going to talk through some of that and then go into kind of how we're developing our services and the process of transformation. So the first thing to say is that we remain committed, along with everyone in the whole health and care system that's looking at research delivery, to the UK being a global leader in the delivery of high quality commercial and non-commercial research that's inclusive, accessible and improves health and care. And obviously that's something that we're all working towards, and is something that we alone as a research delivery network should not and cannot achieve by ourselves. And so alongside that, we've also got a really clear mission statement for the organisation. So our role is to enable the health and care system to attract, optimise and deliver research across England. And that's because the NIHR is focused specifically on England. We work with the devolved administrations to make sure that we have a joined up approach across the whole of the UK, and we'll continue to do that. But the other words here are really intentionally selected around it's our job to enable the work of other people, rather than we are not the leaders of research. We don't design studies, we don't directly fund studies, for example, but we are here to help other people to get that work done in a really effective way. So we're here to help the health and care system to attract in the research that it wants to do, that is going to provide the evidence that the system needs, to optimize those studies to make sure they're as deliverable as possible to achieve those aims around being inclusive, accessible and improving health and care, and to deliver that research across England. And we do that as part of the NIHR's overall mission to improve the health and wealth of the nation through research. So then moving on to our purpose within that. So if our mission is around helping other people to to get their work done well. The way that we do that is to support successful delivery of research studies as a partner in the system. So we're very much seeing ourselves as one of a number of organisations that work across the research delivery system to support the successful delivery of studies. And that will include organisations like NHS England, the Health Research Authority, the MHRA, obviously individual delivery organisations like NHS trusts or GP practices or community organisations, and providing the support that's necessary to help research happen across that system as a partner alongside everybody else. And along with that, we also strategically increase the capacity and capability of the research delivery infrastructure for the future. When we say infrastructure, most of the time we mean people. So making sure that we've got the right people with the right skills and experience, and yes, the right equipment, facilities, and everything else that they need to deliver the research that's coming into the system. And as a result of doing that, our aim is that research will reach more people. It will address the changing population needs and provide the evidence that we need to do that, and to support the health and care system and the economy, and for research to become a routine part of care. That's still what we're aiming to do. So in some ways, not so different from the role of the Clinical Research Network, but much more kind of a strategic focus in there, and much less focus on individual studies. And so in terms of how we then deliver on that purpose, we've then got strategic support for the whole portfolio rather than day-to-day involvement in individual studies, except where study teams request that. And what that means in practice is that for the research that you fund and the sponsors that are then delivering that research, it's up to them to monitor their own performance and think about what capacity and capability they need to do individual studies, and to work with individual sites to make sure that they've got what they need and that the study can progress. And what the network will do is to look at that strategically across the board, whether that's at a regional level, at a study type level, across different settings, across the whole country, and say, if this is what the whole portfolio is looking like, what are we seeing needs to be addressed to make sure that whole portfolio of studies can be delivered, rather than kind of diving into each and every individual study, where that's not really our remit, because that responsibility sits with individual researchers and their teams. We will also, as part of that work, then work across the system to really understand what strategic issues are getting in the way of studies happening, and conversely where those problems have been solved, and we might be able to learn from them and take those lessons and apply them more broadly. So whether that's an individual site that has a same problem with every study, whether it's across a whole region, or whether it's across a particular setting, or whether we see something across the whole country, or specific, for example, we see it in all rural areas or in all urban areas, you see a specific problem, or with particular communities that need specific support. So we're looking at it in that strategic way to say, actually, these are the things that are getting in the way. What might we do about that? So the classic one that we hear about a lot at the moment is pharmacy. And so if we were looking at what are the issues to do with pharmacy, what are the delays that are being caused, what might the system do about it, and then thinking through what's our job to do to help respond to that. So we might undertake strategic projects that we lead to try and address some of that work, and possibly invest some of our funding strategically, for example, to build up capacity in a specific area. It might be about supporting projects that other people do. So, for example, the HRA undertake a lot of work around improving study setup and streamlining processes. So we might help them roll some of that work out, or we might provide some of the intelligence and the evidence that we're gathering about what the problems are and provide that to others so that they can look at the changes that need to be made. So it could be a policy change, or it could be letting NHS England know, actually, there's something here that you need to look at because it sits within your remit. So how exactly we respond will depend on the nature of each individual problem, but it's still that being that strategic enabler within the system, working with all the various partners across it. And then we will still have agile delivery teams who are actively delivering research studies on the ground in the health and care system. And they'll provide additional support for individual studies where maybe we need to get something going very quickly, or there isn't the capacity, but it's exactly the right site that we might put somebody from our agile teams in to deliver that study. But those agile teams will also help us build up the capacity and capability where maybe organisations aren't very experienced in research and need somebody to come in and set their systems up and learn from them as they're actually doing a study for real. And we're still exploring what the best model is for providing that agile support, because we've got a really kind of wide variety of agile teams across the country, and we're really conscious that we don't want to disrupt or kind of have a negative impact on the amount of research delivery support, direct research delivery support that's available. So in terms of moving on then to think about what is actually changing then in the way that we operate, we are building on the foundations of the Clinical Research Network, but we are very intentionally stepping into the RDN as a new organisation. And it's got 5 operating features in how we're thinking about how we'll go about working as a new organisation. The first is, and probably the most impactful, is that we will operate as a single organisation with consistency of experience. So one of the things that we've heard from a lot of people who have utilised the support of the CRN is that it's not predictable what support you will get in different parts of the country, even down to what funding is available or what staff are available to support something, and different processes for making particular things happen. And we want to move away from that so that the network is kind of the gateway to operating research efficiently and effectively across the whole country. So we will still have regional footprints and regional networks because we need those strong links into the organisations that exist across the country, but we are going to operate as a single organisation where a service that we develop looks and feels the same wherever you access it in the country, and it makes the support much more predictable. And that will mean that we don't have quite so much tailored support for every single organisation that we work with, but the benefit of that predictable delivery that can be supported for very large numbers of organisations is what we're aiming for here, and that people have told us that that's what they want to see as well. As part of making that happen, we will then also need collective responsibility and joint leadership across the organisation. We are not implementing a top-down, the coordinating centre sets everything and then the regions implement it. We need the experience and the expertise from across the whole organisation to make sure that we come up with the right answers, both now and into the future, about how we need to deliver our services, so that they meet very specific needs across different parts of the country. And so that collective responsibility and joint leadership will be really important. I've spoken about the collegiate and customer-focused approach where we're a partner in the system, and that we'll have that focus on strategic development, and also an emphasis on continuous improvement. What we want to move away from is kind of designing a service or a process and then kind of thinking that that's done. That our job in the system is to help the whole system run effectively and efficiently, and to be increasingly, improve itself over time. And as the system changes around us, and as the research delivery system becomes ever more mature, the support that's needed will change. The NHS is going to change, the health and care system is going to change over the next few years, and we need to be responsive to that. So making sure that we've got really good continuous improvement and learning processes on an ongoing basis, and to make sure that we're providing value for money for taxpayers, because ultimately that's where our funding comes from. So all of that is how we are kind of building in our future ways of operating. So in terms of where we are in the process, we are still very much at the beginning of the transformation process. And what's set out here is that we are going to have 2 parallel tracks that run alongside each other over the next 18 months to 2 years, in terms of how we deliver the transition and transformation that we're talking about. So between now and October, our focus is very much going to be on the current clinical research network and the local clinical research networks closing down their contracts, stopping anything that's not in our future ways of working, and getting ready to really start delivering on the new ways of working in the research delivery network. And so we're getting our staff ready for that. We're starting to go into our formal transition programs around management of change processes, HR processes for people being appointed into the new structures, and all of that work, it will kind of really kick off over the next couple of months so that we get ready to launch the network in October. Following that, the 6 months following that, from October to March, will be very focused on then designing our strategy, our service design, and our new models of delivery for agile, for our agile delivery models, and for our funding model as well, in terms of how we allocate money across the system. And then from March 2025, so the next financial year, we will then really begin implementing those new ways of working. However, I don't want you to take away from this that nothing will change between now and next March, because that's absolutely not the case. We have already committed in things like the O'Shaughnessy review and some emerging priorities that are coming from change of government, some very clear priority projects, and we are absolutely committed to continuing to deliver on those. And I'm going to remind people what they are so that you know what's coming. But those kind of 2 tracks are what we will absolutely be doing. So continuing to deliver on all the things that we've said that we would, that have come out of things like the recovery from the pandemic and the Recovery, Resilience and Growth Programme. All of that is going to continue and be informed by and will inform the work that we then do to change and improve our services, but that will obviously take a little bit longer to achieve. So just to dive into some of this slightly more in terms of what's actually changing then. So in terms of that transition into a new organisation, we are having an organisational restructure. So we're moving from 15 regional networks to 12. And they match the 7 NHS England regions. So we've still got England coverage with 12 regional networks and an RDN-wide coordinating centre that is based in Leeds and London. There is a new RDN board that leads that whole organisation, and as I mentioned, is about us operating as one organisation. So our board is made up of the leaders from across the directors from the regional research delivery networks and our coordinating centre, and they collectively form the board in a quite flat structure where we are absolutely taking forward joint decision making and joint leadership of the things that are developed and the way that we work. We've also got much greater consistency in structure across our new RDN teams as well, and this is quite a lot of the transitional change that we're going into right now. So new organisation structures with a lot more consistency across all of our RDNs, so that we are able to operate those services that I talked about in much more standardised ways, where we've got people doing the same job in the same way across the country, obviously responding to regional need, but done in a way that's going to result in that consistency that people are asking us for. So in terms of what this will mean in practice, some things will not change. So we will absolutely continue to allocate support cost funding in line with Accord, and the regional networks will do that, working to a national model and then allocating in line with that national model through the regions. We'll continue to provide support for research funders and people applying for research funding, so supporting people to complete SOCATs and validating SOCATs for non-commercial research, and also supporting the processes for recovery of excess treatment costs and provision of excess treatment costs. On the commercial side, we'll also continue to support the National Contract Value Review and completing the costing templates for those studies. We also will continue to have national and regional specialty leads and specialty groups, and we also have settings leads, and I'll come on to describe the settings. In line with our remit very much being focused on delivery of research, the specialty and settings leads are intended to provide leadership and advice to support research delivery and to support projects that increase capacity and capability in specific specialties or settings in order for us to support research delivery. So it's very much with an eye on what does the future pipeline look like? How do we make sure that we can do that optimization part really well, so that studies can come into the system, be placed in the right place, have the support that they need to be delivered well, and our specialties and settings leads have an absolutely vital role to play in that and helping us do that overall portfolio oversight to see where are the issues and what do we need to be responding to. So just I know that you'll all be interested in what our specialties are, so I'll just leave this up so that you can take this in for a sec, because I know some of you will be looking for specific things on here. This is not to say that we won't support any other clinical specialties. The whole approach with the network is that we support all studies, whatever their specialty. It's that these are the specific clinical specialties where people are going to be appointed have a remit around it. Some of them obviously are very detailed, and kind of, one word doesn't kind of provide you with all of the detail into exactly how they will work. So cancer, for example, is obviously a very nuanced specialty that's not represented simply by saying cancer. And while some of the people that are doing this work will carry on, I think national specialty leads, about 75% of them are new to the network, which is absolutely fantastic, that we've got such a lot of interest in joining the new organisation. But those people obviously will take a little bit of time to get up to speed and establish new ways of working. And we're still in the process of recruiting regional specialty leads. So the teams to do all of this work are not yet in place, and the services are not yet developed just to manage people's expectations. But this is absolutely our intention to go forward with. Settings, we have got 4 settings that we're explicitly saying we want to work across. Obviously, a lot of our focus previously has been on hospitals. That's not to say that we haven't worked across other settings. There's been a huge amount of work across all of these settings, but much of our resources and our emphasis has gone on hospital-based research, which we will obviously want to continue, but we want to give increasing focus to, as the whole health and care system is trying to do, to move things out of hospitals and put them in the right place for our populations. So in its entirety, primary care, also looking at community-based care, and I think everything to do with mental health research is being placed in community-based care, even if it's in a hospital, and also residential care, and including things like prisons as well as care homes and hospices. And we will also be looking at how do we enable studies to run across these. We're increasingly talking about decentralized trials or virtual trials, and we'll need different approaches to make those kinds of studies happen in a really systematic and well-supported way. So that's why we're doing this kind of matrix of, yes, it is still about clinical areas, but it's also about where studies are happening, whatever type of study that is coming along. We also then need to develop up, as I mentioned, the detail of our strategy and services. So we will have a network-wide strategy based around our settings and our organisational vision and purpose. So what do we need to develop in terms of our organisation for everything that I've said to be true? And then this is the list of, on the left-hand side, is, broadly speaking, our services list as we're contracted to do, and on the right are the functions that will support their development. And we need to do the detailed work to really work out with stakeholder input what will actually make these deliver the value statement that I've described. So if we really want to create an organisation that's going to enable the health and care system to attract, optimise and deliver research, what do our service and functions really need to achieve in order to do that? Now, we're obviously not starting with a complete blank sheet of paper, but we also want to remain open to changing what needs to be changed around current ways of working so that we can realise the potential of the organisation going forward. And that's why we've got that slightly longer development process, rather than having kind of said, working at, instead of just making some bold statements about we will do X or Y in our services. We've really heard from people that they want to input into it and to make sure that we're developing things in a new way. And so we want to provide sufficient time for that. And that's our stakeholders, but also our staff. In terms of our existing commitments, these are the things that we have committed to do in the O'Shaughnessy review. So alongside all of that strategic development work, these are the things that we will continue. And just to pick out a couple of these that are particularly relevant. So the second one around the network-wide site identification service, this is something that we want to do, as it says, on a whole network basis, where sponsors are able to bring their study to the network and say, these are the essential things that I'm looking for, and that we use the intelligence and the relationships that we've got with the sites to provide very rapidly the list of the best places, a short list of the best places where it would be most appropriate to place a study, and have the opportunity to provide advice about, actually, you aren't really thinking about doing this in primary care, for example, but when you think about the care pathway, it will be a much better place to be there. So making sure that we're adding value to that efficiency piece and also helping the system to kind of move in the direction that it needs to. The key account management service as well will be for commercial and non-commercial sponsors. So it wouldn't be directly with yourselves as funders, but some of the organisations that you provide a lot of funding to, that the big non-commercial sponsors, we want to have a key account management approach with, because I think it's roughly about 50% is with about 20 organisations that are in receipt of most of the non-commercial funding. And so really making sure that we can support them and understand their needs, as well as the needs of our big commercial sponsors. We think that's the best way to really understand how do we optimise our services and make sure that they're working for everyone. And then we will continue to do things like be part of research, and develop the new approach to costing and contracting. As I've said, not costing and contracting, how we use our support cost allocations. And then the two on the bottom on the left-hand side are around our new, or the NIHR's new data systems. So some of you may have heard that one of the big commitments that was made in response to the O'Shaughnessy review was about better availability of management data. And this is building on the CRN was the only place in the system that has systematized data about research management. No other part of the system has that available. And so it's partly about us having visibility of what's happening across the whole system, but it's also about improving what we collect so that we can have a better handle on what's happening with individual studies in order that adds up to us being able to do good portfolio oversight. So that will provide some of our service to funders and research teams in that it will be better data about their studies than we have now, but also to help us do that portfolio oversight role really well. So all of this work will continue and will be prioritised this year alongside all of that work to transition and transform the way that we deliver the other services around this. The last thing I want to say is that our approach to stakeholder engagement is still in development. This is very active thought for us and a real genuine question for the group today. We will work through established groups that AMRC and a number of you will be members of. So, for example, the Clinical Research Recovery, Resilience and Growth Programme. There is an industry working group, and also things like Four Nations working groups. I'm sure AMRC and individual charities are members of lots of working groups, and we are very happy and see a lot of benefit to working through those groups, and also working through AMRC and with individual charities as is appropriate as well. Obviously, much of our service and our support is focused on helping the people that you fund, but we want to make sure that we're maximising the potential and making of working with you and what your needs are. And making sure that we can leverage that relationship so that we can collectively, as partners in the system, improve the way things operate. And I'd be really keen to hear kind of what would be useful going forwards. So I'll stop sharing there and I'll go to questions. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you, Emma. That was really informative and really helpful overview. The chat has started to have some questions coming in, and I'm sure as we start talking, more will come. So I wanted to, we've got a question from Anna from Diabetes UK asking, how do the specialty leads feed into the board? Oh, you're on mute.
The first thing to say is we definitely don't have all of this working as we would want it. As I said, a number of people aren't in post yet. We do have national specialty leads, but we don't have regional ones yet, so the groups aren't yet functional. That said, what we are trying to create is a learning organisation. So what we want to make sure that we're seeing is that we've got day-to-day processes where what the intelligence that is being gathered through the specialty leads, but also through other people in the organisation, is feeding in to tell us what we need to do. What are we learning through that process, and that then has a process of escalation and filtering to the RDN board. So we don't have that in place yet, but that is exactly what the intention is. Because if we don't create those processes where, and it's not just because there's a risk, but it's also actually we're seeing that lots of people are asking for studies to be done in this way, or we're starting to hear problems with this kind of service across different organisations across the country. We need those kind of tentacles out. So that's what we're trying to create. And it will come through the specialty leads, but it will also come through lots of other roles as well.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions about sort of non-commercial partnership and also SOCAT. So we've got a question from JDRF asking about the process to become a non-commercial partner. And of course, being an AMRC member, we have a streamlined process for that. But if you could just say a little bit about whether any of that will change, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, the short answer is I don't know whether it will change. And if it was to change, it would be the process that we have with AMRC members, I think, would not change. So all of the policy conversations that I've ever had about this, both within the department and within the network, have been around recognising AMRC partners as having a specific status across the system. There are no current plans to remove the process for becoming a non-commercial partner. And so that's available on our website, and I'm sure we can find a link for people to apply. I think it's a fairly straightforward process. But what I would say is there is also no, you don't lose out on anything by not being an official non-commercial partner. So it's a process whereby you streamline an eligibility check that everybody has to meet. So it's about peer review processes and how you award funding through open competition. So providing you meet those requirements, you don't need to be a non-commercial partner to have a study accepted onto the portfolio. It simply means that you don't go through those checks every single time you apply.
Thank you. And Caroline, if you've got further questions, particularly on the process, AMRC actually has it as part of our application form, but if you are one of the more longer term AMRC members, then we've changed the process recently to make it really clear where you can benefit from it. But it means that your studies are automatically, as Emma says, on the portfolio as long as they are in open competition for the specific programme round that you're running, and also given out in line with our expert review criteria through our process that we audit on. And then there's a second question looking at asking whether or not we're likely to see capacity challenges or delays with SOCAT and excess treatment cost reviews and sign-off as you transition over to the new RDN, and whether there will be a similar process for considering studies with high levels of ETCs.
I mean, there is every chance that I don't want to pretend that there won't be any capacity issues as we go through the transition. What I would say is that we are very explicitly prioritising the delivery of studies. So activity that will keep the delivery of studies where it needs to be and not impact on study setup times, for example, will be what we ask people to prioritise. And yeah, that's reflected in the priority projects. If you are hearing, if you are seeing delays starting to emerge, obviously you can get in touch with us directly, or please do go through Katrina and her colleagues because us hearing actually this is becoming a systematic problem is really helpful, and for that to be raised quickly. So do let us know, but we will be prioritising, but clearly it's a risk. In terms of the process for high levels of excess treatment costs, I know that there is a process change here that I am not 100% up to speed on, so I'm just going to name that now. But currently, we are not the decision maker about high level excess treatment costs anyway. It sits with NHS England. And so whatever the decision making body is going forward, the processes will support the decisions by the funder of the ETCs. But that might be specifically the thing that's changing, so apologies if I've got that wrong.
Thank you. So I think the other thing that we've got with our charities is sort of two roles, both sort of as a research funder, but also as those more generally interested in the state of research trials that may be happening in their disease areas. So taking at the moment their hat as a funder off, we've got a question from Caroline from JDRF asking about the best ways to access the data. So how can charities broadly understand what is happening within your portfolio and sort of the status of, I guess, both non-commercial but also wider commercial studies, which patients that they are supporting may benefit from over time? And she asked specifically about number of disease-specific trials or studies, number of people taking part in them, and the number of trials and studies delayed or stopped due to recruitment problems.
So these are really excellent questions, and The honest answer is I don't actually know if we do share that beyond the individual studies that are beyond the individual sponsors or funders. So we definitely will be able to share back your own portfolio, your funded portfolio, but I don't know whether we share that kind of information in a way that is useful for people across the system to help them make sense of things. Obviously, the work that we're doing along with the wider NIHR and the wider system around improving our data systems will obviously make that better, but we've clearly got quite a lot of data now that we could utilize for that. So I'm going to take that one away, if that's all right, to find out if we do that and what could be done kind of within current resources to make more of that available, because I can see why it would be helpful.
Thank you. So thinking about the charities that are funding, could you sort of give us a sort of summary on how on the different opportunities or the points at which charities can engage with you as funders, sort of funding research through the RDN?
So in terms of the real opportunity, I think there are two things, broadly speaking. But this is why we're seeking feedback on what our services and our support should be. So to say that before it's not a kind of done deal. So the first is that we absolutely want to understand what the pipeline of studies is that you're thinking about. And I also hear that question in the way that Caroline's framed the previous question of how do we know what's working, what's not, what's already being funded, where should we be putting our efforts? So understanding what's coming through the pipeline, both in terms of kind of what questions are being asked, but also what are the studies looking like, where do we need to build capacity and capability so that we can jointly and looking at it strategically say where do we put our best efforts and how do we utilize our resources to meet that. And then a similar question, but it is different, is then, well, what are the strategic issues that people are seeing across the system? So some of that will be for us to help with, and some of it will be that actually we need to do it as a whole system. But what are the things that get in the way of delivery, or what are your researchers telling you, or what do you wish you had more ability to leverage with your researchers, or where can we, are there things where we should be kind of doing a pincer movement on them to get the change that we need, where maybe we put something in our terms and conditions and it's reflected in the expectations that you have around them as funders. So what can we collectively do to help improve the way that studies run across the system? And I think where that is particularly needed is making sure that they are designed in line with the care pathway in ways that are going to be easy to deliver and easy to participate in, as much as we possibly can do that right from the beginning, because by the time they are approved and they get to us, it's often too late to change that. So whatever we can do upstream of what's coming down the pipeline would be really helpful. But I am very open to kind of what else should we be looking at and thinking about together.
Thank you. And I guess, so then we've got a slightly more specific question then from Sabine Best from Marie Curie saying, so when we are funding studies, how do we get the information on the recruitment for those funded studies? Yeah. I think there's a feeling that charities can potentially support with some of that, but only where they sort of have the real-time information. And is that something you're expecting them to have specifically from the research team, or is there a role for RDN?
Yes, there definitely is. And there's a what we can do now, and then there's a what can we do in the future when we've got the new data platform answer to this. So we definitely have the ability where you are named as the funder on. So when a study comes onto the portfolio and the eligibility is confirmed and all of the information about the funders and the sponsors and everything else is confirmed at the beginning, provided you are included as a funder in that list, which would be the ones that you're the major funder for, I believe, there is no reason why we cannot share back with you the information about your studies or provide you with access to the open data platform where you can see those studies yourself. So Katrina, I wonder if everybody's not getting that, like doing that in a systemized way so that everybody can access the information they need. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. The limitations with it, however, are that it is not real time. So and that's not in a technical sense. So the system is set up so that it pulls information through very quickly. The challenge that we've got, and this is what the big data system project is aiming to address, is that people have to enter the data into a separate system in most cases. And so sometimes it is very delayed by the time they've done that, because they focus on making sure it's in their patient record systems, that it's in whatever the sponsor requires them to send back, and kind of the essential getting the research done systems and the patient care systems are up to date. And then they manually have to put that information into a system for the network. And that has got better over the work that we did through Reset, but it can still be several months out of date before the recruitment is reflected in the data that the network has, which also limits our ability to do portfolio oversight and understand where things are and all the rest of it. So with that caveat, that it will also not be entirely up to date, and the best version will still be the data that the sponsors that you fund hold, that the researchers you fund hold. But the data that we have, there's no reason why that data couldn't be shared with you. And what we're trying to develop into the future is to make sure that you have the platform that you need as this new data system comes in, which is for implementation from 2026. But we're capturing, along with the NIHR data team who are leading on this, capturing all the requirements that people need so that they are going to have what they need from that system when it comes in.
Sounds like 2026 can't quite come soon enough for
I know.
us.
Me too, I have to be honest. I wish we had it now.
Yes, but it will be very helpful, I think, to be able to see that, and you're seeing that in the chat with comments. Even delayed data is helpful, and it reduces the duplication that then people are putting on the researchers to ask them to report directly back. And what we want is those brains to be spending the time on the research and the patient facing stuff. So hopefully that's all a really useful part of time. So I wanted to ask you sort of overall, I guess my question is, we've heard a lot from you about what you're going to be doing, how the RDN is going to be, really, delivering what we need for a research system in the 21st century. But what can medical research charities do to support RDN to deliver its aims and support our shared ambition, I think, for UK research?
Yeah, that's a really helpful question. That's Katrina. So I think some of it is what I said about kind of what can we do together. So there are things that that they come to us too late in the process to help with. So I think pushing the people or expecting the people that you fund to engage with things much earlier, and to really think through where is the best place in the system to deliver a study, to require them to use the services as we develop them. And we don't have them all today. So, this is, it's not that they're not necessarily accessing an existing support mechanism. But if we, for example, if we really want to see research spread across the organisations that have got the capacity to do it, that will help us do things more quickly, that will develop more capacity and capability because more organisations are getting involved, and particularly seeing organisations that are the right place in the care pathway be given the study to do, be contracted for the study to do. The researchers won't always know where those places are, not least if they're not the care pathways that they themselves work through. So, expecting and nudging them to make use of those things and asking good questions of them, I think, is part of it. I think the other thing that I'd really ask for is help to, one of the things that we've really heard from the feedback that we've received is that we have to operate much more as an organisation that is one partner in a bigger system. And I hope you've heard that we're doing a lot of work around how do we make sure that that's the case. But we also then need that to come back the other way, in that sometimes a lot of a problem with research delivery is often then put at our door as something that we need to fix when we're fundamentally not in control of it. So we are not the sponsor, we are not the site, we have no legal responsibility for individual studies. We're trying to provide that strategic coordination and capacity and system improvement across the whole of the health and care system in England. And we are not the legal entity responsible for any of it. So helping us to use your influence to also put pressure on other organisations to do what they need to in the system, so that we get that whole system working together and continue to hold us to account. It's still our job to say, what are the strategic problems and are you investing well to address those? But to do that in that holistic system. And I think part of that, Katrina, is also kind of leveraging the influence that AMRC have got. You're around a lot of tables influencing the system here, and everybody recognises, the big communities that research charities have kind of at their back, and making sure that we can use that influence for change across the system to make sure that we're delivering the system that we all want and need.
Thank you. So if you have any other questions, do make sure you put them in the chat. I think we've heard a number of areas, but I'm sure there are other burning issues, and you've got Emma now at your disposal to answer them if they're there. The other thing I wanted to do was actually bring in Kate as well to ask her view on how charities can engage and what the new role in the NIHR allows us to do as well. Kate.
Hi everyone, if I haven't met you yet, Kate Blackstone, Charity Engagement Lead for the NIHR, so a brand new role for the NIHR. My role cross-cuts the NIHR Coordinating Centre and the RDN Coordinating Centre. So firstly, there used to be lots of different departments. I think the theme of NIHR is we are streamlining. So to the outside world, it is RDN and everyone else. Think about it that way, is the easiest bit. So all funding programs, collaborations, industry teams, etc., sitting under the coordinating centre, and then the RDN itself having its own coordinating centre that Emma's really eloquently outlined today. I think the thing to say is, we know we are a big organisation. We know we can be hard to navigate. So part of our approach to charities is to think about just being here and to have that conversation and start. So I am the front door. I have also been called a broker, a matchmaker, and a GP was the most recent one as the analogy, but I'm the front door service. If you don't know where to go, you can ask me and then I can make connections for you across the system. The other bit is that we are thinking about how we work together. So we've heard this partnerships phrase. So that's what's happening in the RDN, that partnership approach is going across the whole of the NIHR. We've been mapping our partners, both charity, public sector, industry. And it's thinking again about how there's that cohesive contribution to improving the sector, making it work, making it cohesive, whether that's follow-on funding or anything else like that. So we want to hear ideas. If we don't hear ideas, we can't work together. And much like Emma said, same thing, leveraging the relationship through AMRC. So I meet with the AMRC monthly, and we have lots of other touch points across the organisation. So being a member of the AMRC gives you a great voice outside of your own priorities, which very much you can bring to us and talk to us about, but pushing that through at that system level, seeing that it's not just one person, it's lots of people having that issue. And that's what we're working on at the moment, finding those priorities for where we can make that system change and improve things. So if there's any questions for me.
Thank you, Kate. And I know that we'll be seeing more of you over the coming months. And if you haven't seen Kate's blog on the new role as well, do check that out. We'll put a link to it in the chat. So if you've got any other questions, do keep them coming through whilst we have the time together. I think there's something else people wanted to ask.
Can I ask you a question, Katrina?
Yes,
so in terms
of
inputting into the future of the RDN, obviously, I mean, as I do recognise that much of the support is for the people that the members fund rather than directly for the members, notwithstanding the data point, which I'm absolutely taking away from this. And so in terms of how we go about developing our new services and our overall strategy, we want to do that in a really coordinated way, because it's a huge organisation. We've got lots of services and functions, and they are quite nuanced, quite a lot of them, in terms of how they operate, and so we would like to do that through coordinated groups like the UK RRG advisory group, and I know you obviously have a clinical research group that that would I'm sure be interested in doing this. So is that the best way for us to coordinate the input to this, or are people looking for something else in your view? But if other people want to comment on that, that would be great.
Well, I think that hopefully what we can offer is a sort of coordinated way for you to do it. There are over 150 medical research charities, and so being able to get lots of them in one room and get different views in hopefully gives you a good use of time. I think one of the next steps that would be quite exciting is looking at where is the combined leverage on this. So if we understand what the things that you're trying to drive, what are the sort of sticks and carrots that charities have as funders and as patient voice to be able to put pressure on different parts of the system, and then a role potentially for AMRC looking at what do template terms and conditions look like in this space, or what would the guidance look like. So for me, it's a understanding of the things that others should be taking advantage of, that the funders need to know about, so that they're checking and using their sort of incentives to say, and I assume you've already got this sorted here, and RDN are on board, rather than us getting downstream and realizing it's deviated somewhere.
Yeah, super. That sounds absolutely bang on. Yes, great. And I think
also a point in the chat there about from NHAD about signposting to certain services, so for example, in funding call documents, whether they should be using boilerplate, and whether there are specific websites to link to. So it might be worth thinking that through.
And I think we can share those links in a follow-up wrap-up email. But also I think what is one of my would it be useful questions is coming up with some NIHR supported drop-in statements, comms, straplines, whatever, that you can have on your website. So every time I meet with someone, I remind them, here's the link to our weekly and monthly funding alerts. Here's the link to list of all our funding programs. That kind of pushing your researchers to apply to us. There's money in the system. And I think, we're very open to having conversations. So as I say, I can be a start point and say, I want to push more research in this space. And I can say, look, we've got 11 schemes, domestic schemes. These are ones maybe you want to target. And then we kind of pass on to the specialists and talk around those spaces. But there are definitely go-to links. I will caveat that our website is being upgraded. So the system behind it is being rebuilt. So we're going to have a new website come September, October. So hopefully the links will be the same. If not, I will push out through AMRC refreshed links. But then we are going to be thinking about how we support charities on that. So my vision is a landing page, and then a lot more content that tells the story and gives you examples of how we've worked together, that highlights and good work and signposts you out to different services as well. So a landing and navigation function, because no matter what, even with all the improvements we make, it's a website, and it has to support a lot of different users, and there is a lot of material and information up there. So we're going to make a landing page for charities and think about that out and sort of frame it as what we can do for you and what we can do together. So sort of thinking about that as two sides of a coin. So I think RDS, RSS, what was RDS, Research Design Service, now Research Support Service, I think is one that's really important to push. It itself is also through a restructure. It is being treated as a piece of infrastructure now. So it reports into our infrastructure management teams like our CRFs, our BRCs do. And their remit is widening as well. So I think the interesting part of their sentence now is that they are there to support people intending to apply to NIHR or charity-funded calls within the remit of the NIHR. So that gives you that little thing, that contribution to the ecosystem as well, that, that support to design and develop good applications, and that post-award support is there even for people who are going to be applying to your funding pools as well.
Thank you, Kate. So you've also got a comment in the chat or approval from Sabine from Marie Curie to say that they're delighted about the new settings leads and the development for research happening outside the hospital. So seeing that as a really positive move. Okay, so we have one killer question for you in the chat from Grace from Blood Cancer, who's saying, which I will end on, which says, if you had a magic wand and could implement just one system-wide change to improve research delivery in the UK, what would it be? It's your dream. You can go as far as you want.
If I had a magic wand, it would be that all studies were, that everything was done to make sure that they could be placed at the right place in the health and care system. So if something would be in a delivery pathway, that is where the research happens, unless there is a safety reason not to. There is so much opportunity cost from not putting research where it would be in the normal care pathway, of not the people who would be involved in the rollout of it, of all the things about normal practice that you don't capture and it feeling like a separate thing on the side. It requires more resource and oversight. All of that kind of gap that you create between having done the research and making change in practice, a lot of that would reduce. And it would be so much easier to get things up and running if you were making use of existing services and putting research into that. The number one thing when I was in my previous job and in leading the work around the vision for clinical research delivery, the number one thing that came up was about embedding research as a normal part of care. And we will not do that if we don't design studies to be in care. So that if I had a magic wand, there are many things that would make that one thing happen. But if I had a magic wand, that's what it would be for.
And I think mine would be thinking about some of the lessons learned from COVID. And part of it was that huge collaboration, cross-sector collaboration. It was a really different, having spent 10 years in NHS, 13 years in clinical research, and getting one trial with 5 different stakeholders behind it rather than 5 trials on the same thing. Yeah. Because it just so much gets put into the system that is a potential duplication, and it just exhausts everyone, and we all get little pieces of the pie rather than a really big piece of the pie. So thinking about as charities, whether that is you've got lots of charities in the same therapeutic area, or you've got an underlying mechanism of action, different ways that you can kind of cross borders, and as being kind of the honest brokers in the space sometimes, think about how you can get academics, different academic organizations together. These are some of the things that we can pull on you. We're a national funder, we're a national body, but one thing that we can get from you is if you help to bring that sector together in your space. So collaboration for me, pulling that through and sustaining that would be my wand. And for me to give one opinion, it's rare.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Emma and Kate, for setting this up and for coming to talk to us. And thank you for your honesty at a time when this isn't the final product, this isn't finished. I know that this work is ongoing, but thank you for giving us the opportunity, I guess, to feed in and also to hear about it. But you know, this isn't the end of the discussion. This is merely only the start of it. So we've got a feedback survey in the chat. If you want to tell us what more you would like to hear, what you would like to hear differently, that would be great. But just thank you very much, Emma and Kate, for coming along today and for organising this for us.
And to you, and thanks to everybody that's come along.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.